Sure, my name's Paul Doroshenko. I'm a lawyer in Vancouver. I'm a former member of the BC Liberal Party and a former volunteer in the BC Liberal Party. Have we seen Christy Clark, address the problem that we've got with housing? A market economy is a great thing. You can distribute wealth. It's a smart method of distributing wealth because there's motivation to try and produce products, there's motivation to try and produce it cheaper, and there's motivation to distribute it to as many people as possible. That's a great thing. But when you get distortions in the marketplace, a government has to act. And we've got just a significant, devastating distortion in our housing market in Canada. Housing prices and prices for even rental housing are so far out of reach, and what's happened is we've created this situation where you can see that housing prices are climbing so fast that everybody and their dog wants to get into the speculation market, and it's become an international thing. It's happening in Australia, it's happening here, and the governments are not really reacting. And most of the investors who are coming to buy are from China, and they're buying pieces of property because they've got the money and they can see that this is something that's going to create income for them because they're going to be able to sell it for more than what they paid. Speculators. And this is something that the government has not addressed at all. First of all, they denied it. They blamed people for pointing it out. They suggested that people were racist for identifying it. It's got nothing to do with ethnicity. It's got everything to do with economic motivation. And basically, it wasn't until they realized that their asses were on the line that they stepped forward to do something. And what did they do? They did, a tokenism. That's really, if you look right now at what's going on, it has had, it may have had an effect for a few months, but we're right back where we were. So, do we have a properly regulated market economy with the BC Liberals? No, we don't. Do we have has the government been addressing the environmental concerns of global warming and increasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases going into our air and changing our atmosphere for our planet? No, they're not. What are they into it for? They're really into it to basically help those people who have backed them and given them tons and tons of money. And to me, that's just fundamentally unethical. I'll tell you, we have a problem with dealing with financial crimes in this country. Prosecutors who deal with it just find it so overwhelming. The police, when they deal with it, they find it so difficult to put the evidence together. And it basically creates a situation where if you commit a financial crime in the process of construction, of getting contracts, of working, if you're looking for some kickback or something like that, it's almost impossible to prosecute people. So it creates an environment where this is accepted. And when we talk about the corruption scale of various different countries, I think in Canada at least, I used to live in Alberta, I've lived in Manitoba and studied in Quebec. I've never experienced it the way that I see it taking place and playing out now in BC. There's so many projects, there's so much opportunity for graft, there's people who are, taking advantage of it, and, it's unfortunate, but the government seems to be of the view that, you're going to get a job, so live with the corruption. You don't have to have corruption to have jobs. The rest of the world has proven that, but, that's basically, the BC Liberals now don't even address the corruption thing. They just want to move on to the next step, which is forget about the corruption, you got a job. That house in Dunbar and the Buick and the $50,000, I said it before and I'll say it again, it makes my blood boil. You think about Glenn Clark being prosecuted for that deck. I remember I went to watch some of the trial when he was being cross-examined, and there was discussion about the deck, and he was being cross-examined. It was Bill Smart, who's a very smart, sharp, intelligent lawyer who was maybe not, he was the choice to prosecute him, right? They picked a guy who they thought would go after him, and he was cross-examining Glenn Clark, and I came up to him in the break and I said, you got him on a contradiction there. Why didn't you sort of go for the throat? And Bill said to me, you know what, Paul, all he wanted was a deck. And he's right. I think he was becoming, I wouldn't say that he was sympathetic. He wanted to get the evidence out, but you could compare that, a deck, to this luxury SUV the $50,000 a year that she was getting, which was donor money being redirected to her, and this house in Dunbar. I mean, a house in Dunbar these days is $3.5 to $4 million for a nothing special house. On the premier salary, you cannot buy a house in Dunbar. It's just, that's out of the question. We're not talking about fancy houses, but it's a fancy neighborhood where these private schools are. She's living in this house, and she's never answered any questions, as far as I can see, about what she's paying for in rent, who's the owner of the house, who's getting the benefit of this. To me, it's just shocking when you compare those two things. Glenn Clark getting a deck, on the back of his modest house, and Christy Clark, who is running to be the MLA in Kelowna, is living in Dunbar in a house that's owned by somebody else, and we have no financial disclosure to suggest that she's paying anything substantial by way of rent. Well, I think the thing that people should ask themselves is, on Wednesday morning, am I going to regret the fact that I just handed another victory to the BC Liberals by voting Green? We in the Liberal Party, back when I was a member of it, we were well aware that the Greens would take more votes from us than they would from the Liberals, and I expect that will be the same. And I'm concerned, and I suspect, my feeling is that the Liberals are going to succeed again, because they've had tons and tons of money to advertise, and the vote split. And so, I would ask myself before I go into to cast my ballot, whether or not I want to see a Liberal government, because if you're voting Green, you're likely going to be assisting to elect a Liberal government. So that's the first thing I would think people should ask themselves. I think the next thing people should ask themselves is, what's your ethical viewpoint? Do you actually believe that fair is fair? If you think that fair is fair, you can't support a government that takes money paid to their party and then gives contracts to those people who pay that money from the government, rewards them with contracts. If you think fair is fair, you shouldn't support that. You should support anything but that. And I guess the last thing that you should ask yourself is, is your fear of the NDP grounded in any reality? You take a look at the candidates who are running for the NDP, and they've got very solid candidates, smart people, well-educated people, well-rounded people, and balanced people. It's not a situation like we've had in the past in BC. You go back 30 years in BC, and this was class warfare between unions and some fairly extremely wealthy people in the province. It's not like that anymore. The NDP is a much more diverse party than it used to be, and unions don't have that same role. And the reason they don't have that same role is because we have fairly good legislation that protects workers. Is your fear of the NDP grounded in reality? And for most people, I think that if they actually think about it for a few minutes, they'll realize that it's not.